All right. So we have started with the last topic of SQL query. Not exactly last, there's one more thing. But at least I could say that I have started with the second type of SQL query, which is a dynamic. The SQL queries are of two types, static and dynamic. Now, every static query must always be written inside a square bracket like this. Whereas the dynamic query, what we are going to write down, has always been written inside single inverted. Now, majorly, if we say that under which circumstances of programming you are going to use the static query or else a dynamic query, we had a discussion on that. On yesterday's session, we had discussed. So you always have to remember that if we are forming a static query, if we are writing a static query inside in square bracket, if you are writing a static, this actually means that you have every information with you. Have a very concrete, very fixed information, and that everything what requires to form a query is available. Everything what requires to form a query is already available. See, the queries, they are very simple. I mean, if we talk about the format, it's like select. Then comes all of the field names, field or column names, right? All of the column names. Then comes from, and after from it comes like object name. You can say object or table, one and same, table name. That's it. This is the format. This is the syntax of writing a query, designing it. So when I'm saying that if you are forming a static query, if you are constructing a static query, that means whatever required inside a query is already available with you. That means you know from which object you are fetching, from which object you are trying to get the data. And second, what are those fields from that particular object which we are trying to fetch it out? What are the fields we know and from which object it's going to come in? So when every information that is required to design a query is available, when every information that requires design a query is available, then we can definitely go with the static query. And that's how we were studying this from the beginning. From the day one when I started with the SQL query, we have designed only static queries. But then yesterday was a very interesting discussion what we had done, isn't it? And I have told you that in real time, there would be so many of the scenarios whenever if you are trying to create an interactive user interface. Now, what does it mean by an interactive user interface? So interactive interface means you're asking user to enter some inputs. You're asking the user to enter certain inputs, certain values, certain parameters. Now, my interface, when he would enter that, maybe there are some of the text fields, some of the check boxes are there, some of the selections like quick list is there. And whenever he made those selections, whenever he is entering those values, we would require to capture that. And based on that, those selections, based on those inputs, what user is supplying in runtime, we have to form up. Based on those inputs, what the user is supplying, but in runtime, which is dynamic in nature, we don't know what user is actually going to enter in runtime. But we are capturing those inputs, and based on that input, if we are designing a query, then obviously, see, there is certain level of uncertainty over here. There is a certain level of uncertainty over here that you, in the beginning, don't know what user is going to enter. What user is going to enter. But whatever he's entering, whatever he has entered in the user interface, based on that, by capturing those parameters, we'll have to design the query. Now, because the information, now let me summarize this. Let's not discuss a lot on this, because yesterday a dedicated session I have given you just to understand what is a dynamic query. Let me summarize this. Let's end this and let's start with dynamic. So whenever the parameters are coming, whenever the informations are coming dynamically in runtime, then we cannot go with the static query. We would have to design dynamic. All right. So that was a whole discussion what we have seen. Now let me take an example. Read this use case. This is very important. Write an Apex program to search for the lead records based on specified input supplied by the user but at run. So user is going to enter something related to the lead object. Based on that, we'll have to find out the record and we'll have to display the result. What he could enter, there are 2 points. If the input value is a string, then search the lead based on the last name. That means if the user is entering a name, then you have to make your search against that name. If user whereas if user is entering email, then you'll have to search based on email. I'll try to elaborate this more. Just give me one. Yes. So what we are talking about, let's consider there is an user interface like this. Even yesterday, I have tried to show you few of them which I have designed in Visual Force page. So let's consider there is a user interface. There is a front-end entity like this. Now this could be a Visual Force page. This could also be a Lightning page. There is a front end. More importantly, there is a front end. Then we are writing a question over there. So we are writing enter name or email of lead. User wanted to search a lead record. User wanted to search a lead record. So we are giving him two possibilities that what you can enter inside in this text box. Let's consider this is a text box. And we are saying to him that you could either enter a name. If you know the name, write the name of that lead over here. And we're going to show you the details of complete record. Or else if you don't know the name, the search begin if you would enter here the email ID of that. And after doing that, there's a button called as submit. Let's consider there's a button called as submit. Right, there's a button called as submit or search, whatever. Search. So when he would press this button, we're going to fire a query and get the data and display that data in the front end. So this is what I'm. Now see, there is an. I mean, how would you design the query? Let's talk on that. So basically, if I would try to form a query for this, see, if he is entering, like we are searching it from lead. So let me take the lead record. If let's consider if he is entering a name or maybe an email ID. If he is entering an email ID like this, not sure whether this is actually an email ID or I'll take something from lead object. So if this is a lead record, so I was talking about like if the user has entered, if the input what user has entered is an email ID, then my query would becomes this: select ID name, email from lead, where email equals to this. If the entered quantity what the user has entered inside in the checkbox, if it's an email address, then this becomes my query. Where what? Email equals to this. Where email equals to this. All right. But if he has entered, I mean, beside entering the email, if he has entered name, then there is slight changes in the query. It becomes like where name equals to this one. Exactly. See, if he would enter the name, this is your query. Where name, I mean, the where clause is then going to be applied onto name. If he is entering the name, it's entering the string. Whereas if he is entering the email, this becomes your query where email equals to. So yes, of course, there are slight differences in the query, and we are not sure. We know what query is going to be get applied, but then we are not exactly sure. We cannot say that he's always going to enter the names. Why? Because the question is enter name or email ID. If you would have said to him that enter name for search, then it's obviously he's always going to enter the name. Or rather, if you have said to him like enter the email ID, but then you are giving this user interface is giving two possibilities to him. So when the interface itself is giving multiple possibilities, we have to accordingly design the SOQL, right? So how we are going to tackle this? Now let me take a program for this. And we're going to understand this through the coding. Well, let's go to developer console. I guess we already have a class called database helper. Yes, it is good. So I have created two separate methods. Let me create one more method. Give the name as public static void, because we are searching lead record. So I'm giving the name as search lead records. Search lead records. And see, I'm making this as a parameterized method. Why? Because we are expecting something from user. And whatever user is entering inside in that text box, we will going to take this inside this variable. So I'm defining a string variable. Now, how that thing is going to come from front end? How will you bind your front end with the back end? This is something, in my portion, I'm going to teach you within Visual Force space. But next to you will also going to learn this inside Lightning training. How would you bind the things from front end to back end? Like whatever user is entering, that is inside in front end part. How that parameter is coming to the back end. This is called as bindings. So these all bindings you're going to understand later on. Right now, you'll have to assume this. You just have to assume, and you'll have to assume that whatever he is entering in that front end part, in that user interface part, we are collecting that inside a string variable called as search text. We are collecting that inside a string variable called as search text. Now, my whole logic, try to understand. See, concentrate over here because now I am explaining you the program. All right. Now I'm explaining you the program. Please concentrate over. If you feel sleepy, go and have your sleep. Complete your sleep. Come back and watch this video. But if you are here, you should be 100% true. Okay? Chalo. I hope at any moment of time, if you feel you are not understanding, you can raise your hand. Problem in this. No problem in this. If you not understand any single point, don't wait for anybody else to ask the question on your behalf. Your problem in this world is only your problem. Who is going to solve your problem? You first of all would have to ask for them. Nobody else is going to ask, nobody else is going to talk. Nobody else is going to ask on behalf of. If you don't understand something, this is your own responsibility. All right. Let me finish my coffee. Yeah. So whatever user is entering in the front end, there are two possibilities. Either he could enter a string, name, or he could enter a pattern of email ID. In simple, he could enter name, he could enter email. But by the way, whatever he is entering, I have bounded that I'm collecting this inside a string variable called as search text. The first responsibility in your program is to check whether, see, if the value of search text, if it is not equals to null, and value of search text is not equals to empty. Now, why I am looking for this? Why I am looking for this? Why I'm looking for this? Because we wanted to avoid null pointer exception, right? See, the whole logic beyond this completely depends on to the fact what user has supplied us as an input. I have told you that there are going to be two different forms of query. There are going to be the two different forms of query where email equals to this or where name equals to this. So that completely depends on to this fact what user has entered, what the user has supplied to us. There are two possibilities. He could enter the name, he could enter the email. There is one more possibility that is beyond the discussion. He has not entered anything and he just has pressed the search button. That is again a possibility. So if he does not have given any input, if the search text is null or it is empty, write down one question over here. Write down one question over here. Every one of you will have to find it out. What is the difference between is null and is empty? What is the difference between is null and is empty? Every one of you has to find it out. This is an interview question. What is the difference between is null, is empty? You have to find it out. All right. Go and Google this. Anyways, sure. So the whole logic depends on this possibility whether user has entered a name or he has entered an email ID. The complete logic based on this only. And that's the reason search text, that's the reason search text must have a value. So I am checking for that whether the search text is not null. It should ideally not null and should ideally it's not empty. If it is empty, I'm not going to do anything. We can here write down a message like system.debug. Right now we are displaying this on the console, but yeah, there could be a mechanism that we could brought this to the user interface also. User has not entered any value to search. Right. So if user has not supplied any input, you can give a message. Right now we are giving this message on console. Later on, we can give this on to the front end as well. Please enter some value to search, something like that. Challi. Now we'll go with this possibility that user actually has entered something. All right. Sure. Now let me design a dynamic SOQL query while considering those two facts. All right. See. Now let's talk about a dynamic. Although I have written them in the notes, it has been written. You will have to read this all. Notes are for you, notes are not for me. Whatever the query is written inside the notes, this is for you. You have to take the printouts of them, do the spiral bindings, and you should always keep this with you. Whenever you are studying, you should always keep this also. So it has been written, dynamic queries are always stored inside a string query. And whenever it is getting executed, dynamic query does not. Yesterday, I have told you to find out the differences between static and dynamic. I don't know because no one has responded in your WhatsApp group. I don't know whether you have find it out. Because I always used to say, if I am giving you any homework, if I am giving you to perform any findings, you should always share your findings into the WhatsApp group. Don't keep this within yourself. This is not good. And this is not good. See, in the Salesforce, in the real time, whenever you would work, not just in Salesforce, in the whole community of IT, sharing is very important. There are so many applications, websites, blogs where people used to share their findings. And this would help a lot many others as well. Yesterday, I have given you one question. I have given you one assignment that try to find out the differences between a static query and a dynamic query. I cannot know, because nobody has responded, I would consider that no one has solved this. And please don't unmute yourself now and say, sir, मैंने तो किया. आपने किया है तो फिर आपने अपने तक क्यों रखा? Everything, whatever I am asking you to do, you'll have to share that in your. This would not going to take, this is not going to make any impression of yours. Don't feel like if you would going to respond, I'm going to get impressed. I'm very sorry to say, but I would not going to be get impressed. But at least what I could understand is somebody, this is a person who's taking me seriously. So if you are not taking all these things seriously, it's not going to hurt me anymore. So obviously it's going to affect you and your. So the differences between the static and dynamic first. Static query is always written inside square bracket. Dynamic whereas is written inside single quote. Static queries, whenever they are executed, they are executed automatically. They don't require a separate method to get executed. That means if I would design a static query, if I would design a static query like this, select ID, name, first name, last name, or maybe just name, email from lead, where something like that. This query would going to be executed automatically when this method would get invoked. Whatever it would return, you'll have to capture that, right? Have to capture that. I could define a lead variable, lead ls equals to this. Now this error is going to be get written. I'll try to save this. Error is going to be get written. So whenever you design a static query, this query is going to be get executed automatically if you invoke this method. How to invoke that method? That is also known. You will go to the execute anonymous window. There you would invoke this method, isn't it? Like you have invoked get all accounts. In the same way, you would invoke. So when this method is getting executed, the static query which is inside in this method would also going to be get executed automatically. But this is not the case with the dynamic. Dynamic query does not get executed automatically. There is a separate method to execute that. You have to execute that method in case if you wanted to execute the time. So this is a big difference. This is a big difference between a static query and a dynamic. This is a big difference between the static queries and dynamics. Chalo. And there are a few more what I have told you to find it out. Chalo. So let's consider now that search text is not null and it is not empty. So I'll have to design a query. But the static, this is a dynamic query. Dynamic query must always be present, is always stored inside. This is always stored inside a string variable. This is also again is one difference. Dynamic query is always stored inside a string variable. Static query does not request. So there are 2 to 3 points. I guess 3 or 4 points are there between static and dynamic query. There is not much differences. There are only 3 or 4 points maybe. You just have to find it out and write it down and usko fir yaad karenge. So a string, I'm defining a variable. Let's consider lead record query. And then inside in this bracket, inside in this what? Single inverted comma, I'm going to write my query. But see, I've told you one thing that there could be 2 different forms of query. So what I'm going to do, let me take up to this. Select ID, name, email from lead, and I'm writing this query. Select, giving one space. Select ID, name, email from lead. All right. Select ID, name, email from query. Select ID, name, email from lead. ठीक है, इतना मैंने query. But this is not a complete query. You know this because मैंने query पहले execute करके दिखाया है. अभी बचा है इसमें where email या फिर where name. Now the second portion of this, कि अब इसके बाद क्या मैं डालूं? Where name equals to this or where email equals to this. That completely depends what the user is supplying, what this search text is containing. इसके बाद का जो पार्ट, चलो इतना कॉमन है दोनों क्वेरीज में, दोनों पॉसिबिलिटीज में, चाहे यूजर नेम दे रहा है फिर चाहे यूजर ईमेल आईडी दे रहा है, दोनों सूरतों में इतना तो एटलीस्ट कॉमन, सिलेक्ट आईडी नेम ईमेल फ्रॉम फील्ड, सिलेक्ट आईडी नेम ईमेल, तो उतना पोर्शन जो कि कॉमन है, दैट आई हैव स्टोर्ड इनसाइड अ स्ट्रिंग वेरिएबल, स्ट्रिंग का मैंने वेरिएबल डिफाइन किया। वैसे भी हर डायनामिक क्वेरी इज ऑलवेज स्टोर्ड इनसाइड अ स्ट्रिंग बाय द, ठीक है। अगर कल आप लोगों ने डिफरेंसेस फाइंड आउट कर लिए होते तो ये बात आज आपको ये बात अच्छी तरह से पता होती, अगर आप लोगों ने कल डिफरेंसेस फाइंड आउट किए होते तो। चलिए कोई बात नहीं, आपने नहीं किया, आगे से सीरियसली रखेंगे इस चीज को, ठीक है। तो ये क्वेरी अभी आधी अधूरी, इसके बाद का वेयर क्लॉज में मैं क्या डालूं, वेयर नेम इक्वल्स टू या वेयर ईमेल आईडी, दैट कंप्लीटली डिपेंड्स what value this variable is holding search text, what value this variable is, alright, ठीक है। तो अभी मैंने इस क्वेरी को आधा ही रखा, ठीक है। अब हम आगे बढ़ते हैं, इसके बाद तो we're going to talk about the first possibility, कि अगर यूजर जो एंटर कर रहा है वो एक ईमेल आईडी है, ठीक है, अगर वो एक ईमेल आईडी है तो ये हमें कैसे पता चलेगा कि यूजर ने जो एंटर किया है, यूजर ने जो इनपुट दिया है, जिसको हमने सर्च टेक्स्ट नाम के एक वेरिएबल में स्टोर कर रखा है, तो ये पता लगाने के लिए टू आइडेंटिफाई whether the input entered by user is an email or a name. To identify, I think whether की स्पेलिंग गलत होगी, WEA होना चाहिए आई गेस, नहीं ये वाला तो वो वाला वेदर हो, चलो ये जो भी है हम समझा। टू आइडेंटिफाई वेदर द इनपुट जो यूजर ने एंटर किया है वो ईमेल आईडी है या वो नेम है, क्योंकि इसके बाद का ये क्वेरी कंप्लीट करने के लिए इसके बाद मुझे एक इंफॉर्मेशन चाहिए, whether the name equals to this or whether email equals to this, उसके पहले मैं पता तो लगाऊं कि यूजर ने क्या किया। Now to know this, what the input which is user is entering and which we are actually capturing inside search text, वो वैल्यू क्या है, तो उसके लिए मैं एक रेडीमेड क्लास है हमारे पास, उसका मैं यूज करूं। देखिए एपेक्स प्रोग्रामिंग, आई हैव टोल्ड यू, even though if you are designing your own logics, apex coding, out of that complete coding what you are doing, 70% portion is automated and 70% methods पहले से available है, you just have to know on which particular thing I'll have to go with this one. So ये पता लगाने के लिए कि ये जो यूजर एंटर कर रहा है उसको वो क्या है, तो एक पैटर्न मैचेस करके एक क्लास है, उसका मैं यूज करने वाला। if of course, if is a question, if pattern dot c, if pattern dot clone compile matcher matches pattern code, I mean pattern is the name of a class, by the way. There is a standard class called as pattern and I'm using a method inside this called as matches, pattern matches. Now see, return type is boolean, yes or no, true or false, and input is matches को, इस मेथड को दो इनपुट होते हैं, दिस इज अ पैरामीटराइज्ड मेथड, स्ट्रिंग regex, I'm going to tell you what it is, and string input. This regex stands for regular expression and second is simple input. समझाता हूं मैं, regex and second input. So this regex stands for regular expression. आ रहा हूँ उस पे भी आ रहा हूँ धीरे. And you are comparing this input whether it matches to this or not. बताता हूँ. तो मैं क्या करता हूँ, इनपुट मेरा कहां पर है, वन बाय वन जाएंगे. इनपुट इज अवेलेबल इनसाइड अ वेरिएबल कॉल्ड एज सर्च टेक्स्ट. तो इनपुट को तो मैंने रिप्लेस कर दिया सर्च टेक्स्ट के साथ. इनपुट को तो मैंने रिप्लेस कर दिया सर्च टेक्स्ट के साथ. अब ये सर्च टेक्स्ट को कौन सा रेगुलर एक्सप्रेशन डाल, REGX स्टैंड फॉर रेगुलर एक्सप्रेशन. इसके लिए मैं चलता हूं और आपके सामने गूगल कर fx regular expression for email validation. For email validation. So if I would enter this, there are a lot of sources from where I could get it. Let me try it. The first one. What I'm trying to get a regular expression for email validation. For email validation. Do you see this? Do you see this? Let me just copy this, right? Let me just copy this. Up to over here. So this is what? This is a regular expression. This is a regular expression. I'm going to explain, don't worry, don't. And I would be replacing this REGX with this one. Okay? With this one. अब यहाँ पे क्या होगा इंटरनेट. चलो अब थोड़ा सा हम इसको डिटेल में जाते. This regular expression is for email ID comparison. That means if the user has entered, whatever user has entered, the user entered quantity, जो user ने enter किया है, which we have stored inside search text. Whatever user has entered is stored inside search text, and we are comparing the value of search text against this regular expression. So if this would return me true, if this would, because matches the return type है boolean, जो मैंने अभी दिखाया. Boolean में दो ही बात आती है, true और false. अगर if it is returning me true, इसका मतलब जो user ने enter किया वो email ID. Because this regular expression is a regular expression of email. It's regular expression. हाँ, regular expressions क्या होती? Regular expressions क्या होती? Compilers आपने नहीं पढ़ा है सब्जेक्ट. आप में से अगर कोई कंप्यूटर बैकग्राउंड का होता, मैं कहता कि क्या आपने कंपाइलर एक सब्जेक्ट होता है इंजीनियरिंग ग्रेजुएशन में, कंपाइलर्स आपने पढ़े हैं. कंपाइलर्स या कंपाइलर डिजाइनिंग नाम का एक सब्जेक्ट होता है. तो कंपाइलर बेसिकली वो सॉफ्टवेयर है, वो प्रोग्राम है जो आपके प्रोग्राम को एग्जीक्यूट करता है. दिस प्रेजेंट इनसाइड योर मेटाडेटा, a program behind a program that is responsible to execute your program. Your program is something called as application program. All right, whatever you are creating, this program what I am creating, you would be creating. Every such a program which user is creating is called as application program. And who is responsible to execute this program? There is a program called as compiler, assembler, linkers, loaders, everything. Those programs are called as system programs. System. And see, in so many times I have taken a word called as Apex runtime engine. Apex runtime engine is responsible to perform this execution. So compiler is present inside Apex runtime. Now see, regular expressions like this. Regular expressions is a known pattern. Is a known pattern of to compile. Is a known pattern to the compilers. Compilers internally know what this expression looks like to be. All right, this expression looks like to be. See, everyone, and this is very simple to understand. We as a human being, we also understand, we have this capability that we could understand so many different forms of languages, isn't it? God has made us such a capable person, such a capable being that we could understand a lot of the patterns. Some of them are visual patterns, like symbols. Some of them are audible patterns, like languages. What I'm saying to you is mostly in Hindi or in English. You understand that. And you also understand your own native languages. So there is again a compiler in our brain which is capable to decode all those patterns. That pattern, whatever is the input which is coming to you, maybe you're looking into some symbols. You're driving a car and their symbol comes on the board and you understand what is the meaning of that. Your brain has been prepared, brain has been trained in a way that it understand, and it can decode that pattern. If I'm saying to you, hello, how are you? Your brain immediately say, oh, he's asking about how you're doing. Oh, I'm good. How are you? In the same way, compilers understand a language. That language is called as lex. 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 And every statement inside lex is always written using regular expression. Now, this is engineering. अभी मैं engineering करवा रहा हूँ. Compiler have a language. The language of compiler is called as lex. And whenever he do that analysis is called as lexical analysis. Lexical analysis. What compiler do, it always perform lexical analysis. See, in general, if you would ask somebody what a compiler do, he'll always say compiler is responsible to perform the execution of a program. I mean, same question if you would ask this to a computer engineer. What compiler do? He'll say compiler always performs a lexical analysis. Compiler always performs a lexical analysis. What is lex? Lex is that language of compiler. And every statement inside lex is always a regular expression. Now, probably you have this. So, regular expressions are the known patterns to compiler. When you would give this regular expression to compiler, the Apex runtime engine, he know what is this. आपके लिए अजीब अजीब से सिंबल दिख रहे हो, जैसे ये मिस्र के पिरामिड में लिखे हुए सिंबल्स हैं. For you, it seems to be a little, what to say, little different thing from what you usually see in every day. This seems to be a little different. Compiler के लिए नहीं है बॉस. Compiler के पास इसका similar pattern उसकी memory में already available. वो जानता है कि this is a regular expression of email ID. email ID. email ID का ये regular expression है. और आपने इसको कहाँ डाल दिया? If pattern dot matches, आपने matches के अंदर डाल रखा है. So matches क्या करता है? दो चीजों को कंपेयर करता है. दो चीजों को कंपेयर करता है कि भाई साहब ये इनपुट, इस वेरिएबल के अंदर जो इनपुट मौजूद है वो, and this regular expression whether they are same or not. That's it. That's it. If it would return true, आप यहां पर आ जाओगे. तो अगर मैं इस ब्लॉक के अंदर आ रहा हूं तो इसका मतलब the entered input is an email ID. Entered input is an email ID. अगर सर्च टेक्स्ट में मौजूद इनपुट मैच होता है इस पैटर्न के साथ, ये रेगुलर एक्सप्रेशन है और ये रेगुलर एक्सप्रेशन है ईमेल आईडी की. अगर ये मैच होता है इसके साथ तो इसका मतलब जो इनपुट एंटर किया गया दैट्स एन ईमेल आईडी. और अगर ये नहीं होता है, एल्स अगर ये नहीं होता है तो इसका मतलब जो इनपुट एंटर किया गया है वो ईमेल आईडी नहीं है. तो फिर नहीं है तो फिर सेकंड पॉसिबिलिटी क्या है भाई? तीन ही पॉसिबिलिटी है. अगर यूजर एंटर कर रहा है कुछ भी नहीं, ये नल है, तो हमने बोल दिया कि भाई साहब आपने कुछ एंटर किया ही नहीं। अब आप बोल रहे हैं उसको कि नेम या फिर ईमेल आईडी, अगर उसने ईमेल आईडी दिया, ये पैटर्न के साथ मैच होता है तो ईमेल आईडी है। और अगर ईमेल आईडी नहीं है, अगर ईमेल आईडी नहीं है, तो वी वुड टॉक अबाउट द थर्ड पॉसिबिलिटी कि जो यूजर एंटर कर रहा है इज नेम ऑफ लीड रिकॉर्ड, लीड रिकॉर्ड का नाम, उसके हिसाब से फिर मुझे क्वेरी फाइनल करनी, राइट, इसके हिसाब से मुझे क्वेरी फाइनल करनी। सो अगर वो ईमेल आईडी एंटर करता है, अगर वो ईमेल आईडी एंटर करता है, तो आई कैन प्रिंट इवन दैट सिस्टम डॉट debug, I can even print that system.debug. The entered input is an email ID. पहली बात तो ये प्रिंट कर लेता हूँ। अब उसके बाद में फिर मैं क्वेरी को, ठीक है, चलो क्वेरी आधी अधूरी इस वेरिएबल में स्टोर की गई है लीड क्वेरी रिकॉर्ड में, बस इतनी सी क्वेरी है, सिलेक्ट आईडी नेम ईमेल फ्रॉम लीड, इसके बाद का कंप्लीट नहीं है। अब मैं उसको यहाँ पे कंप्लीट करता हूँ, ठीक है, लीड क्वेरी रिकॉर्ड, लीड क्वेरी रिकॉर्ड प्लस इक्वल्स टू। Now, can any one of you please tell me what does this means by plus equals to? Because ये तो ऑपरेटर है। हाँ, प्लस इक्वल्स टू का मतलब क्या होता है भाई? चलिए, yes, प्लस इक्वल्स टू का मतलब क्या होता है? I guess you already have this command to unmute yourself. You can do that. What is the meaning of plus equals to? If I'm saying plus equals to, what does it means? Plus equals to means क्या होता है? If I would say 9 plus equals to 1, what does this statement equals to means? Or when I say sum plus equals to 1, what does it means?
Sir, concatenate.
Sorry, Snail, if you are saying something, I probably cannot hear you.
Sir, concatenate.
Concatenate.
Oh, sorry.
It's not concatenate. That is simple plus. Simple plus is concatenate. Yes.
So it's sum plus 1 equals to like you have written 9 plus equals to 1.
Let's say sum was 8. Sum was 8 initially, and now you are writing sum plus 1 equals to 1.
So
What is
it will perform the operation of addition.
So what is going to be the value of sum after this?
So 9.
Yes, very good. See, plus equals to is to perform the addition and store it back to that variable. Plus equals to would perform the addition, it would increment. Minus equals to would perform decrement by what value, whatever you wanted. And it will store result back to that variable. All right, so I am appending something, I'm increasing, I'm adding something to this query, and I wanted it to get stored back to this variable. This query is an incomplete query. I'm adding something to this query, and the entire, see, previously, even though the query is an incomplete query, the query must always be stored inside a string variable. That is a rule of dynamic query. And that's why while I have designed this query, I have stored this inside this string variable. Now, because I told you in the beginning, this is an incomplete query. Now I'm trying to complete that. So even after getting completed, it must be getting stored. It must have to be stored inside the string variable. That's why lead query plus equals to. All right. Now, because that's a string must always be enclosed within single inverted comma. What is my complete? If the pattern entered is an email ID, if the pattern entered is an email ID, right? So I'm copying this. See, I am copying this. Where email should equals to, where email should equals to, where email should equals to. Let me repeat this. Where email should equals to, where email should equals to. That means the email you're designing the query based on email. So email should equals to search text. Email should equals to search text. Because we confirm the entered input, what this variable is holding is an email ID. Pattern.matches has confirmed that this is an email ID. If it's an email ID, I'm completing my query where email equals to search text. But because that is coming dynamically, so it should be where equals to colon. So colon always means it's a dynamic entity. I mean, it's coming dynamical. All right. So this is why you have to include colon. So it's where email equals to dot, where email equals to dot बोल रहा हूँ, colon search text. ये हो गया आपका क्वेरी कंप्लीट. ठीक है. ये कब? जब यूजर ने एंटर किया हुआ, तो यूजर ने एंटर किया है सर्च टेक्स्ट की वैल्यू अगर ईमेल है तो. लेकिन अगर सर्च टेक्स्ट की वैल्यू एल्स में आप कब आ रहे हो? व्हेन यू आर कमिंग इनटू एल्स में आप तब आ रहे हो, जब यूजर ने जो एंटर किया है वो ईमेल आईडी नहीं है. अगर वो ईमेल आईडी नहीं है, इसका मतलब क्या? सिस्टम डॉट debug, यूजर ने जो एंटर किया है दैट्स अ नेम, वो एक नाम, वो नाम है लीड. तो अगर वो नाम है लीड रिकॉर्ड का, तब हमारा क्वेरी थोड़ा सा डिफरेंस आ गया. तो इज कॉपिंग द सेम स्टेटमेंट वेयर नेम इक्वल्स टू, तब मेरी क्वेरी बदल जाए. वेयर नेम इक्वल्स टू दिस, लेट मी ट्राई टू सेव दिस अप टू दिस. ठीक है. वेयर नेम इक्वल्स टू दिस. ये हो गया क्वेरी. अब मेरी क्वेरी कंप्लीट हो चुकी है. तो अगर सुनिए, यहां पर मैंने क्वेरी फॉर्म तो किया लेकिन इनकम्प्लीट है. ये क्वेरी इनकम्प्लीट बिकॉज मुझे सर्च करना था या तो ईमेल आईडी की बेस पर, और या फिर मुझे सर्च करना था नेम की बेस पर. 2 मिनट दीजिए, मैं राम सर को फोन करता हूँ. क्लास पोस्टपोन करने के लिए 15 मिनट, अदरवाइज वो लॉग इन कर लेंगे, मैं लॉग ऑफ होता हूँ. जस्ट गिव मी अ राम सर को एक मैसेज ड्रॉप कर. ठीक है. So I first of all have evaluated कि यूजर ने क्या एंटर किया है. उसके लिए मैंने पैटर्न क्लास की मैच फंक्शन का यूज किया और एक रेगुलर एक्सप्रेशन ढूंढ के निकाली जो ये पता लगाता है कि whether the entered input is an email ID. तो यहाँ मैंने रेगुलर एक्सप्रेशन का इस्तेमाल किया. रेगुलर एक्सप्रेशंस क्या है ये मैंने आपको डिटेल में बता दिया. अगर ये पैटर्न मैच होता है, उसका मतलब जो यूजर ने एंटर किया है वो एक ईमेल आईडी, और अगर वो ईमेल आईडी है तो आई हैव अपेंडेड, ऐड किया वेयर ईमेल इक्वल्स टू दिस. अब ये क्वेरी कंप्लीट हो गई है. और अगर ऐसा नहीं है तो फिर मैंने अपेंड किया वेयर नेम इक्वल्स टू दिस, वेयर नेम इक्वल्स टू दिस. अब मेरी क्वेरी कंप्लीट हो चुकी है. या तो क्वेरी में अपेंड होगा ईमेल या फिर क्वेरी में अपेंड होगा नेम, और क्वेरी मेरी प्रेजेंट है एक वेरिएबल में जिसका नाम है लीड रिकॉर्ड क्वेरी. ठीक है. अब मेरी क्वेरी जो है वो कंप्लीट हो चुकी है. मेरी क्वेरी जो है वो कंप्लीट हो चुकी है. क्वेरी कंप्लीट हो गई तो एग्जीक्यूट भी करना. भाई क्वेरी सिर्फ कंप्लीट हुई है, एग्जीक्यूट थोड़ी ना हुई है. अब कल मैंने कहा था कि आप लोग डिफरेंसेस फाइंड आउट करेंगे स्टैटिक और डायनामिक. स्टैटिक क्वेरीज आर ऑलवेज एग्जीक्यूटेड ऑटोमेटिकली. स्टैटिक क्वेरी फायर एंड फॉरगॉट, आप फायर कर दो और भूल जाओ. डायनामिक क्वेरी ऐसा नहीं है. यू डिजाइन अ क्वेरी that is not going to execute it automatically. स्टैटिक क्वेरी का फायदा है कि आपने अगर क्वेरी को जिस मेथड के अंदर आपने लिख दिया, जब वो मेथड इन्वोक होगी, जब वो मेथड एग्जीक्यूशन में आएगी, आपकी स्टैटिक क्वेरी ऑटोमेटिकली एग्जीक्यूट हो जाएगी. बट दिस डज नॉट हैपेंस विद डायनामिक क्वेरी. डायनामिक क्वेरी ऐसा नहीं है बॉस. इवन दो इफ यू हैव डिजाइन अ डायनामिक क्वेरी, don't make this assumption that this is going to be executed automatically when the method is getting it. No, no, no. अगर कल आपने डिफरेंसेस निकाले होते तो आज ये बात और अच्छे से आप dynamic queries never gets executed automatically whenever the method is getting in. It's not happen unless you execute it manually. And there is a method to do that. There is a method to do that. This has been written. ये notes में आप ढूंढेंगे आपको मिल जाएगा. There's a method called as database. Let me write it down. Database dot query. Database dot query. This is a method. This is a method. Database dot query. This is a method. What is a return type? List of S object. बात करता हूँ इसके बारे में. Database dot query is a method. Database dot query is a method to execute dynamic query. ठीक है, तो इसके पैरामीटर में आपको dynamic query देना है. Dynamic query कहाँ है? मेरी query कहाँ पर है? My query, I have stored this inside a string variable called leads query. Here my query is present. Database dot query. ये एरर अभी हट जाएगा यहाँ से थोड़ी देर में, इसकी चिंता मत करो, हट गया. लेकिन फिर भी ये इनकम्प्लीट है. ये इनकम्प्लीट. पहले इस पे बात करते हैं. सी dynamic queries, they are never executed automatically. Dynamic queries are never executed automatically. We need to invoke SOQL. We need to invoke dynamic SOQL. Dynamic SOQL query manually by using database.query method. So if you wanted to execute dynamic query, they are never going to be executed automatically like your static. अगर आपने एक मेथड के अंदर स्टैटिक क्वेरी लिख रखी है, तो जब वो मेथड इन्वोकेशन में आता है, जब वो मेथड एग्जीक्यूशन में आता है, आपकी क्वेरी अपने आप एग्जीक्यूट हो जाती है और कोई स्पेशल एफर्ट लेने की आवश्यकता नहीं पड़ती. लेकिन डायनामिक क्वेरी ऐसी नहीं. डायनामिक क्वेरी जो है, आपने उसे जिस मेथड में लिख रखा है, I have written this inside a method called as search lead. आगे चल के जब मैं इस मेथड को इन्वोक करूंगा, तो ये डायनामिक क्वेरी अपने आप एग्जीक्यूट नहीं होगी unless you have asked for a method called as database.query. So database.query is a method to execute dynamic queries. और उसके अंदर एज एन पैरामीटर आपको अपनी डायनामिक क्वेरी देनी पड़ेगी. तो आप चाहें तो पूरी क्वेरी इसके अंदर भी लिख सकते हैं, और चाहें तो ये स्टैंडर्ड वे होता है, अपने शुरुआत में ही अपनी क्वेरी को एक स्ट्रिंग वेरिएबल के अंदर स्टोर कर लो और लीड database.query के पैरामीटर में आप वो वेरिएबल का नाम सप्लाई कर. अब एक क्वेश्चन है मेरा, वैसे तो आंसर मैं इसका बता चुका हूँ, फिर भी व्हाट इज अ रिटर्न टाइप ऑफ एन SOQL क्वेरी? व्हाट इज अ रिटर्न टाइप ऑफ अ SOQL क्वेरी? SOQL क्वेरी जब एग्जीक्यूट होती है, रिटर्न टाइप क्या होता है? यस, come on, what is the
List
return type?
collection.
Exactly, very good, Bhagyashree. It is always a list collection. इस बात से कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता कि आप एग्जीक्यूट कर रहे हैं डायनामिक क्वेरी या फिर स्टैटिक क्वेरी. The return type of an SOQL query is always going to be a list collection. ठीक है, ये कभी ना. तो हो सकता है एक नाम से, एक ईमेल आईडी से मल्टीपल रिकॉर्ड्स हो, तो इस पॉसिबिलिटी को ध्यान में रख के मैं यहाँ वेरिएबल ना डिफाइन करते हुए लिस्ट कलेक्शन डिफाइन. तो बिकॉज हम डेटा कलेक्ट कर रहे हैं लीड का, तो इट वुड बी लिस्ट ऑफ लीड. लिस्ट ऑफ लीड, गिव एनी नेम लाइक LST leads equals to database.query. All right, LST leads equals to database.query. Considering this possibility that when this query is getting executed, it might be possible that there will be or there would be certain more records with the same email or same name. So I'm considering this fact, and that's why I'm defining a list collection. Otherwise, मैं एक variable पे define कर सकता. If I would take this possibility कि हमेशा एक नाम से एक ही रिकॉर्ड रहेगा, बट अगर बाय द वे कभी ऐसा हुआ एग्जीक्यूशन के दौरान, अगर मल्टीपल रिकॉर्ड्स आ गए, तो वहां पर आपको रन टाइम एरर आ जाएगी. इसलिए हम वो सारी पॉसिबिलिटीज को ध्यान में रखें कि देखो, लिस्ट कलेक्शन दे आर केपेबल टू स्टोर सिंगल रिकॉर्ड, इवन मल्टीपल रिकॉर्ड्स. तो अगर आप लिस्ट कलेक्शन डिफाइन कर देते हो क्वेरी का रिटर्न टाइप, तो फिर आपको चिंता करने की जरूरत नहीं पड़ती, आपको फ्यूचर के बारे में सोचना नहीं पड़ता। अब चाहे आपकी क्वेरी एक रिकॉर्ड रिटर्न करे या एक से ज्यादा रिकॉर्ड रिटर्न, लिस्ट कलेक्शन इज केपेबल। तो एक रिकॉर्ड भी तो, किसने कहा कि कलेक्शन में एक रिकॉर्ड स्टोर नहीं होता, ऐसा तो कहीं लिखा नहीं है। तो कलेक्शंस आर केपेबल टू स्टोर सिंगल रिकॉर्ड एज वेल एज मल्टीपल रिकॉर्ड, इसलिए हम वो चांस नहीं उठाते। बीइंग अ डेवलपर वी डोंट नो, रन टाइम में अगर क्वेरी ने एक ही रिकॉर्ड रिटर्न कर दिया, ठीक है, अगर वेरिएबल आपने डिफाइन किया उसने एक ही रिकॉर्ड रिटर्न किया तो ठीक है, अगर उसने मल्टीपल रिकॉर्ड्स रिटर्न कर दिए तो तब तो आपको रन टाइम एक्सेप्शन आ जाएगा, है ना। इसलिए हम लोग ये पॉसिबिलिटी को ध्यान में रखे हुए वी वुड ऑलवेज यूज लिस्ट कलेक्शन, और हम इसके बाद अब कभी इस बारे में बात ही नहीं करेंगे। वी वुड ऑलवेज कंसिडर दैट क्वेरी would always would return me multiple record। देखो अगर मैं लिमिट इक्वल्स टू 1 देके भी करूंगा तो भी मैं लिस्ट कलेक्शन ही लूंगा। तो वी विल मेक दिस अ रूटीन हैबिट that return type of any SQL we would always going to take it a list collection। ठीक है, तो ये हमारे रन टाइम एक्सेप्शंस को अवॉइड कर दे, ये हमारे रन टाइम एक्सेप्शंस को अवॉइड कर। चलो, सो आफ्टर दिस एग्जीक्यूशन अब मैं थोड़ी बहुत और चीजें ले लेता हूँ यहाँ पे। कितना रिकॉर्ड्स रिटर्न किया है वो प्रिंट करने के लिए सिस्टम डॉट डीबग द टोटल नंबर ऑफ रिकॉर्ड्स फेच्ड इक्वल्स टू, कितने रिकॉर्ड्स फेच हुए हैं वो देखने के लिए इसका साइज देख लेते हैं हम। ये कलेक्शन में जितने रिकॉर्ड्स होंगे वही आपका साइज रहेगा, प्लस दिस डॉट साइज, जैसे मान के चलो 1 रिकॉर्ड, 5 रिकॉर्ड, 10 रिकॉर्ड, जितने, और फिर उसको हम इटरेट कर लेते हैं और उसको प्रिंट कर लेते हैं। उसके बाद में मैं यूज करता हूँ कि फॉर, एक एनहांस फॉर लूप ले लेता हूँ, एक एक रिकॉर्ड फेच करेंगे यहाँ से और उसको हम प्रिंट करेंगे। हर रिकॉर्ड जो फेच हो रहा है उसका डेटा टाइप है लीड, लीड ls इक्वल्स टू सिस्टम डॉट रीड रिकॉर्ड इक्वल्स टू प्लस ls, that's it। ठीक है, ये ऑलराइट। चलो, टाइम इज टू एग्जीक्यूट दिस प्रोग्राम। काफी एफर्ट लिया हमने इस प्रोग्राम में, अब इसको हम एग्जीक्यूट कर लेते हैं। See whether this would give me such lead records। ठीक है, चलो, so I am invoking that method what we have just now designed this method। चलो, सबसे पहले मैं यहाँ पे as an input I'll try to give email ID। I'll try to give an email ID as an input parameter। And let me now try to execute this। The entered input is an email ID। ये किसने कंफर्म किया? पैटर्न डॉट मैचेस। उसके बाद अब ईमेल आईडी है, अगर अगर वो ईमेल आईडी है भाई, उसके हिसाब से फिर सबसे पहले तो ये हुआ हो, तो सबसे पहले तो ये देखा गया कि सर्च टेक्स्ट को वैल्यू मिली कि नहीं मिली। तो सर्च टेक्स्ट को वैल्यू मिली, हमने सप्लाई किया ना, हमने सप्लाई किया ये वाली वैल्यू, ये सप्लाई किया। उसके बाद पैटर्न डॉट मैचेस ने कंफर्म किया कि सर्च टेक्स्ट का वैल्यू क्या है, ईमेल आईडी। ईमेल आईडी है, इसलिए आपको सिस्टम डॉट डीबग में क्या दिख रहा है, सिस्टम डॉट डीबग में क्या दिख रहा है, द एंटर्ड इज एन ईमेल आईडी। उसके बाद अगर ईमेल आईडी है, वो अगर ईमेल आईडी है तो क्वेरी कंप्लीट हुई, और क्वेरी कंप्लीट होने के बाद में सीधा यहाँ पे जाता है और क्वेरी एग्जीक्यूट करता है, और उसके पता है कि टोटल नंबर ऑफ रिकॉर्ड जो फैच हुए वो 1 है, और उस रिकॉर्ड को उसने प्रिंट भी कर लिया, उस रिकॉर्ड को उसने प्रिंट भी कर लिया। ये है वो, राइट। अब मैं दूसरी पॉसिबिलिटी ट्राई करता हूँ मैं, जिसमें आई वुड टेक दिस एज So I would take this as an input. And let me now try to execute this. See, the entered input is a name, and this is what the details. So that is what is the role of your pattern dot matches particularly. This is what is the role of pattern dot matches. All right. So go with this program today. Do your assignments. Let me see what others. So by tomorrow, I'm going to talk on this all, and probably we are going to finish it out. No, relationship queries is still there. ठीक है, at least operators जो है हमारे in or like operator, like operator, that I would be going to finish by tomorrow. उसके बाद relationship query is another topic. Yes, that's all. And I cannot take your question because I have asked Ramsar to postpone his class for it. If you have anything to ask, just post me into the WhatsApp. Thank you so much for joining. Have a good day.